I've been waiting for something to happen, for a week or a month or a year, with the blood and the ink of the headlines and the sound of the crowd in my ear. You might ask what it takes to remember, when you know that you've seen it before, where a government lies to a people and a country is drifting to war. And there's a shadow on the faces of the men who sent the guns to the wars that are fought in places where their business interest runs. On the radio, talk shows, and the TV, you hear one thing again and again, how the USA stands for freedom, and we come to the aid of a friend. But who are the ones that we call our friends? These governments killing their own, or the people who finally can't take anymore, and they pick up a gun or a brick or a stone, and there are lives in the balance. There are people on the fire. There are children at the cans. And there is blood on the wire.
Now, Matt Weinstein with Brooklyn for Peace and Marcia Newfield, a representative of the Professional Staff Congress, talk about the egregious fact that the federal government spends 60% of its discretionary budget on endless war. And they're demanding that the money be moved from war to our communities. Support City Council Resolution 747. This flyer in front of me that says, if we move the money from war to our communities, and it says, we can fix our subways, have modern, well-funded schools, affordable housing, and health care for all New Yorkers. And that's where I want to start with this campaign, Move the Money, and understand really where we're moving the money from to begin with and the kind of amounts we're talking to, and then how this campaign has evolved and how we can possibly politically get that money funneled into the needs of our communities. And with that, both Marcia and Matt, I'm very pleased to have.
I will jump right in just by talking about a real study in contrast that could set off this discussion. And that is what we've been witness to over the last 9 or 10 months of this horrific pandemic. And that is a Congress that dickered and debated endlessly a COVID aid package, a lifeline to help out struggling families, working families who are sinking under the combined weight of this pandemic and a cratered economy, and a McConnell and his henchmen in the Senate who stonewalled and blocked it with everything that they possibly could do for some 9 months. At the same time, this Congress passed, not only with the Republicans, but overwhelmingly Democrats as well, except for a small minority, without even as much as a murmur, a $740 billion annual Pentagon war budget. Is there any greater illustration of the terribly lopsided spending priorities that we have in our Congress in Washington? This has gone on year after year, with well over 50% now of our federal budget diverted to the military and to the arms manufacturers. All the while, our cities and states struggle to make ends meet in providing vital services to our residents. And now with the pandemic and the unemployment and the homelessness and the hunger that pandemic has left in its wake, the needs are so much very greater. So that's the frame of why we need to move the money from war to our communities.
Marcia, a couple of years ago, the mayors of the country, the mayors met. They passed a resolution that every city should have a public hearing, so that every city should ask their city council to pass a resolution to have a public hearing about the military budget and the fact that the military budget was too big, and that if the military budget could be reduced, then there would be more money community needs. When that happened, people came back to New York. That's when the move the money idea was born. And Councilman Ydanis Rodriguez was willing to sponsor this resolution called 747A to have a city council hearing on the efficacy of having a reduced military budget. So that is the beginning, is move the money.
And it should be noted that Philadelphia and other cities have already passed similar resolutions. And it not only calls for in-depth public hearings to find out just how much money our city sends to the government, gets used in wars and endless wars and manufacturing of unneeded weapons and enriching defense contractors, but how much comes back. We pay much more in than we get back from the federal government. When Ydanis Rodriguez, the councilman for Upper Manhattan, introduced this resolution, a campaign was begun, a coalition was organized, of which we have now over 60 members with very strong labor participation, including 1199, which has done yeoman service. We collected 3,000 signatures on postcards of people in the streets, at street fairs, on street corners. 1199 sent its organizers into their hospitals and collected signatures from its members. These were directed at council members.
I am at the PSC, and the PSC is one of the unions that supports this resolution. And we got a lot of
Professional Staff Congress, correct?
Professional Staff Congress, CUNY, that represents about 33,000 faculty and staff. So we in our delegate assembly, once a month at the PSC, we got a lot of these postcards. Now the postcards on the one side have a picture of Martin Luther King with a quote, and on the other side it has the note to your council person and your zip code. So we've organized a lot of that. How many postcards do we have, Matt, signed?
We collected over 3,000.
How do you really organize a public that has been primed towards war, towards militarism, to demilitarization and taking money from the military to repurpose it?
I don't believe that the public does support these budgets. When you ask them the question, how do you want your tax dollars spent? We have been out on the streets of Brooklyn, in Brooklyn for Peace, my organization. Thousands of people we have interviewed. They have taken our famous penny poll. We have these little lucite tubes. We give them 20 pennies. That represents the discretionary budget of $1.1 trillion. How do you want your money spent? And inevitably, a wide cross-section, overwhelming majority of people ask, put it into schools, into transportation, into affordable housing.
Well, that's great to hear. So I want to ask Marcia, who deals with a young population of students, can you evoke their interest? Has that proven to be something that they pick up, Marcia?
Yes, they do. They understand. I mean, I think that they feel impotent. Instinct is for the right thing. To have money for housing, money for medical, and all that. And they've been frightened into, we need money to protect ourselves. Another objection comes that if we went from military addiction to economic sustainability, there's a way to repurpose these industries to peaceful, useful work.
Matt, you mentioned 1199. Now, 1199 is one of the few unions that is known historically as having a better peace and agenda rather than just a straight-up economist perspective on organizing. Right. How do you see reaching, and what success if you have had, with other organized labor groups to bring them on board, because goodness, their voices would be so important, and their resources.
Yeah, shouldn't we have the UFT involved in this campaign? We certainly should, because schools have been cut to the bone and need tremendous funding, especially during a pandemic, to send students back safely. You need funds, so they should be on it. You know, that's a big battle, but having said that, we have quite a few interesting labor participation already. 1199, AFSCME Local 549 DC 37, member of our coalition. Professional Staff Congress, Marcia is here today from CUNY. The Domestic Workers United, the UAW 1981 National Writers Union, NYSNA, the New York State Nurses Association, because health care in this pandemic has been shown we've been seeing how threadbare our public health system is. So they're right on the front line. And the Retirees Association, DC 37.
What are the kind of money that we're talking about? Are we looking at bloat of the Pentagon? Or are we looking at the bloat and just the realization of sustaining the war industry? So what kind of monies do you think are available, and what are we asking the Pentagon to release, to repurpose and recycle?
You know that half of the Democratic caucus voted to cut Pentagon spending by 10% to invest in human needs. That was the Markey Sanders amendment that was put forward. It wasn't passed, but half of the Democratic caucus voted for it. So there's an increasing realization. I mean, you should read Markey's statement on it. It's wonderful. Trillions of dollars in defense spending did nothing to protect the American people from the corona pandemic. Defense spending can't protect us from the destruction of the environment and the worsening climate crisis. We should prioritize eradicating poverty, not war. We should prioritize battling global killer diseases, not developing new weapons designed to eradicate the human race. It's time we fund education, not annihilation, Medicaid, not missiles. And half of the Senate Democratic caucus voted for that. Hello, there's an elephant in the room. Our cities and states and people are sinking from this pandemic, and they glibly pass another $740 billion without even considering taking off a few billion and sending it out to the cities, so that we can have schools open safely, we can have our streets cleaned, we can have affordable housing.
What percentage of our tax dollars is actually spent by the federal government on endless wars?
Military is 61%. That $727 billion goes to military. 61%. Housing is 5%. Education is 5%. Government is 6%. Veterans benefits is 7%. You get the picture. So it's really more than half. It says here on our website, it says it includes nuclear weapons and the endless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
So the issue of Resolution 747, what's the significance of, what does it actually mean towards the ultimate end of moving the money from war to our community, to sponsor Resolution 747?
Okay. Well, 747 means if it got passed, that the New York City Council would have a public hearing about the needs of the community versus the military spending. How much X million would go to help this and that and the other, and how X million in military spending is really useless. Say New York has that kind of public hearing, and then Chicago has it, and San Francisco has it, and Podunk has it, and Rochester has it, and there starts to be a movement.
So the city council, you're looking for money? We'll tell you where to find money. Pass this Resolution 747A. And to the listeners on today's radio program, call your council member, email them, go onto the city council website, type in your address and find out who your council member is. Move the money from war to our communities. And I was going to ask you to complete
that. So aside from calling, you've stimulated people so much that they really want to be a primary part of this. They want to bring it to their unions and get their unions on board.
Right on.
They want to bring it to their faith-based organization. They want to bring it to their community group, their block group. How can they get involved with you folks?
Well, as Marcia said, we have a Facebook page. Go onto Facebook and search for MTM, Move the Money, -NYC. because there are other Move the Monies. Move the Money -NYC, either on Facebook, on Twitter, or on Instagram. We're on all three of those. Find your council person and write to them and get your organization to sign on to the Move the Money Coalition. Now over 60 organizations in New York City.
It's a movement, Mimi. It's a little seed. It's the seed of a movement, and it correlates with other anti-war movements that have been around.
Peace Action, Brooklyn for Peace, yes, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. The issue also is this is an anti-war move. Talk about that as well as we wind up this and again remind people how they can get involved. Marcia?
Okay, so is there another way to live? That's the bottom line here. We are teaching children about climate, right? In other words, we couldn't avoid it any longer because it's in our face. Whether it's the flood, the fire, or whatever, you can't ignore climate disruption. Because it's so in your face, you have to deal with it. Well, military spending is also in your face because of its drain on our resources and its perversion of what we believe in. We believe in hegemony of the United States being the dominant power in the world, and by conquering everything, well, we are part of a group that feels that we have to move away from that because it hasn't yielded what the potential of living differently could yield. Spending our resources more cooperatively and more humanitarianly could lead to a better world all around. Whether it's Facebook, Move the Money, whether it's Bitly, Move the Money, whether it's talk to your city council person about it. Start getting people talking about what's war for.
Well, as we wind up, once again, Matthew Weinstein, how do we get involved in this campaign? What do we do?
We search for Move the Money -NYC on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And by going to those links on Facebook, you can join us and bring your organization along. You know, you asked the question, how do we oppose war? Isn't this an anti-war movement? Well, all war is local. Like Dr. King said many years ago, every bomb that's dropped on Vietnam explodes in our communities back in the USA. Isn't that true? It's not that we have to repurpose and reprioritize. It's that it's destructive here at home. Look at the militarization of our police force, as we evidenced this summer. My goodness, they have sent their weapons surplus into the police departments of our cities. That's war at home. Look at the threadbare nature of our health system, of our city services, all victims of war spending, of outsized, excessive war spending that benefits who? The military and the weapons contract.
And I'm immediately emailing movethemoney@nyc.gmail.com, or I can call 212-603-3752. That number is 212-603-3752. And if we move the money from war to our communities, what do? We get transportation. We get housing for all. And I just want to clarify that when we say affordable, we mean low income. We mean low-income housing.
Right on, sister.
And
right on, sister.
I thank you for bringing this important campaign to our listeners. Let's get on board and let's move that money from war to our communities.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I've been speaking with Marcia Newfield, the Professional Staff Congress Representative, and Matt Weinstein with Brooklyn for Peace. You can get in touch with the Move the Money campaign at movethemoney.nyc@gmail.com. That's movethemoney.nyc@gmail.com, and call your city council person and Speaker Corey Johnson and say, move the money, we support Resolution 747. For equal rights and justice, I'm Mimi Rosenberg saying stay strong and stay well.